attack on Ukraine. The Russians struck Kyiv, Chernihiv, Lutsk, Ternopil, and Zhytomyr. They launched Shaheds, Kalibr missiles, ballistic missiles, and Kabs. Once again, Putin's army demonstrated its methods of warfare, killing civilians, destroying residential buildings and infrastructure. In the capital alone, 3 people were killed. These were rescuers who were working under fire to help others. More than 20 people were injured, including 9 rescuers, metro workers, and Kyivgaz specialists. Some of them are in serious condition. Residential buildings, a metro line, a gas station, and warehouse facilities were damaged. Debris covered 3 ambulances that were responding to emergency calls. The vehicles were riddled with shrapnel and glass. In one of the districts, a piece of a Shahed drone crashed into an apartment on the 11th floor. Fortunately, the people who lived there managed to run out into the hallway in time.
I came because of the noise. 2 apartments are on fire. The firefighters have just arrived. People are afraid to go outside. My friend and I found the engine from the Shahed drone. Then a heavy barrage started, and we hid in the parking lot.
The night was terrifying. The night was really scary. We were sleeping, and then there was this loud sound, like a motorcycle driving. It was such a loud sound. And then there was a terrible, terrible explosion. We were on the 7th floor, so we went down to the parking lot. And then we went back home.
At the main exit, there was a car at the main exit. Everything fell on it. It got completely crushed. When I tried to move it, I cut my hand, had to get stitches on my fingers.
On June 4th, 2 days before the massive attack, Donald Trump had a phone conversation with Putin. Afterwards, the American president wrote on his social media page that the Kremlin dictator was supposedly determined and planning to respond to the Ukrainian web operation during which Russian military airfields were attacked. Trump said that he asked Putin not to do this and even threatened the Kremlin with tough measures, although he did not specify what those sanctions might be or when he would be ready to implement them.
If Russia ever dares to cross the line, make no mistake, you will without a doubt be absolutely amazed at just how incredibly tough and resolute we will be. I'm not friends with anyone.
At the Institute for the Study of War, they believe that Putin used this phone conversation with Trump to present himself as a victim. He tried to convince the US president that Kyiv supposedly isn't interested in peace. And this is despite the fact that Ukraine strikes exclusively at military targets.
Putin's statements to Trump were likely also aimed at diverting attention from his own lack of interest in negotiations and his continued preparations for a prolonged war in order to avoid possible future US sanctions by portraying Ukraine as the bad actor. From the report of the Institute for the Study of War.
The Ukrainian Ministry of Foreign Affairs emphasized that Ukraine's strikes are acts of self-defense, whereas Russian shelling of Ukrainian cities constitutes acts of aggression and terror. Russia is killing civilians and has been acting this way since the very beginning of the full-scale war. And the whole world sees and understands this perfectly well. That is why international pressure on Moscow must be increased as soon as possible.
At night, Russia responded to the destruction of its aircraft by attacking Ukrainian civilians. The difference between Ukraine and Russia is that Ukraine strikes legitimate military targets such as aircraft equipped to bomb our children. Russia strikes residential areas, civilians, and critical infrastructure. It is unacceptable to equate Ukraine and Russia. Russia is the aggressor, and Ukraine is defending itself. Ukraine's strikes are acts of self-defense, whereas Russia's strikes are acts of aggression and terror. Russia's only argument is terror. Our response must be tough sanctions that can increase the cost of war for the aggressor and new measures that strengthen Ukraine's defense capabilities. Andriy Sybiha, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine, on social network X.
In public, Putin has still not commented on the strikes against Russian military airfields. The Kremlin only dryly noted that they are supposedly waiting for the results of the investigation. According to the Security Service of Ukraine, during Operation Web, 41 aircraft were hit, including the A-50, Tu-95, Tu-22, M3, and Tu-160. Overall, the aggressor country has lost 34% of its strategic cruise missile carriers. But both the Kremlin dictator and all the propaganda media remain silent about this.
I see this not just as a tactic, but as the natural behavior of a person who leads a large criminal gang. In other words, this is mafia-like behavior. We know very well that when the head of a large mafia clan faces a serious problem, he first of all, believes that revenge should be postponed and carried out in silence. In other words, from his point of view, this will strengthen his position.
No one has ever managed to stop killers by trying to reason with them. The combined Russian attack on peaceful Ukrainian cities is yet another proof of this. Military support for Ukraine and crushing sanctions against Putin's war machine, that is what Kiev is once again asking its partners for.
We are really counting on strong measures. That is exactly what is in short supply right now, and what could even make such scoundrels in Moscow feel that they can't handle this war. This must be ensured, and that is exactly why new and sufficient sanctions are needed first and foremost from the United States. That is precisely why clear political pressure is necessary for effective diplomacy. There are simply no peaceful initiatives left in the world that Russia has not rejected. They dislike everything. The only things they like are ruins and killings. They must be held accountable for this.
The United States could impose sanctions against Russia in the near future. The bill prepared by Senators Lindsey Graham and Richard Blumenthal would deliver a significant blow to the Russian economy, which directly depends on oil and gas exports. For any country that buys these from the Russian Federation, tariffs of 500% are stipulated. Essentially, these are prohibitive tariffs that make importing sanctioned goods from Russia virtually impossible. Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives Mike Johnson stated that there will be enough votes for this bill. By the way, he himself promises to vote yes.
Many members of Congress want us to impose tougher sanctions on Russia, and I support that. Mike Johnson, Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives, from a New York Post publication.
Europe is also preparing its own sanctions. The 18th package will address lowering the price of Russian crude oil. In addition, measures will be taken regarding the Nord Stream gas pipeline and the Russian banking sector. But most importantly, Europe will act in tandem with the United States. This was also mentioned during his visit to Washington by German Chancellor Friedrich Merz.
America currently holds a very strong position, and it can put an end to this war unleashed by Russia. Let's discuss together the necessary steps and assistance for Ukraine. We need to put more pressure on Russia, and this must be done.
It is important to note that the Russian side has still not accepted the proposal for a ceasefire. Moreover, the document that was handed over to the Ukrainian delegation in Istanbul, as Volodymyr Zelenskyy emphasized, is essentially an ultimatum, not a memorandum of understanding. And all the aggressor wants is to keep killing. The massive shelling of Kyiv, Zhytomyr, Lutsk and Ternopil is yet another confirmation of this. And it is very important that this crime does not go unpunished either.